I was born on October 5th, 2000, in Rochester, New York, to a Peruvian mother and an Argentine father. In August of 2005, I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan. In November of 2011, I moved to Argentina. In March of 2013, I moved to Mexico. And finally, I moved back to Ann Arbor in August of 2016. My parents come from similar backgrounds. My mother was born in Peru, but to a Chinese father and a Mexican mother, and she moved to Mexico at the age of 9. My father was born in Argentina to two Argentine parents, but he moved to Venezuela in his teenage years in order to escape the dirty war. We are textbook examples of what is known as third culture children, or children who are born and raised in a place that is different than that of their parents. The first culture is that of the place where they grew up. Typically, this is more than one culture due to the fact that TCKs tend to move around a lot during our childhoods. The second culture is that of our parents. And the third culture is the combination of these two or more cultures which come together to create a complicated and intricate cultural identity of the person in question. This is probably not a term that many of us are familiar with. It was coined fairly recently. Dr. Ruth Useem, a sociologist, coined the term in the 1950s to describe her own American children raised in India by two American parents. How many of us here today are immigrants or first-generation Americans ourselves? This is very probable because the UN estimates that 244 million people in the world today are immigrants. This number is rising steadily. The number was 174.5 million in 2000 and 220.7 million in 2010. Currently, it's estimated to have 31 million children immigrants in the world. There are many reasons for this increase, but let's piece apart some of the bigger ones. Globalization is a large factor in this. Our countries are becoming increasingly more economically interdependent, and because of this, countries will send satellites abroad all the time in order to place a market for their product in a foreign country. Basically, people will move for their jobs sometimes, and this was the case for my family and I. Safety is another big factor. Crises such as the Syrian refugee crisis or the Venezuelan dictatorship cause people to move out of their home countries in search of freedom, safety, refuge, and ultimately a better place to live. This was the case for my parents. My mother left escaping the Peruvian guerrilla war, and my father left fleeing the Argentine dirty war. Finally, another one would be social migration. Sometimes people will move simply because they think that it is a better place to live. They will move to get closer to their friends and their family, to a specific culture, to a religion or a language. Ultimately, people will move in order to find some sort of improvement in their lives. So as I mentioned before, there are several million immigrants in the world today, 31 million of which are children. When children grow up in a country that is not their own, they develop before they get a chance to develop their own solid cultural identity. This creates what we know as cultural rootlessness. Dr. Useem dedicated her studies to finding out what separates TCKs from non-TCKs, potentially cultural rootlessness. And to summarize what she found, one point would be that TCKs experience prolonged adolescence. Since we get to grow up in a place that is very unstable, we don't get to live with one stable set of friends or one home, one language, one culture in our lives. We tend to experience apprehension about the concept of setting down roots when we grow older. This can lead to uncertainty about things that are more commonplace for our world's teenagers, such as where do I want to go to college, where do I want to live in the future, what do I want to work as, but it can also lead to other problems with our identities, such as what language do I want to speak when I grow up? What country do I want to live in? Will I ever set down roots, or will I remain rootless my entire life? Some TCKs also experience heightened rates of depression and anxiety due to this cultural identity crisis. Another example would be how TCKs have problems connecting to their own ethnic origins. Because we often do not get a chance to become immersed in our parents' origins or in the culture of our own home, we will tend to experience some apprehension about what our own identity is, because we truly do not know. This is where my own struggle lies. Because I have roots in Peru and Argentina and Mexico and China and America, I often wonder, which cultures do I get to claim for myself? Which ones do I get to identify as, because I'm just little bits and pieces of so many of them? Many of us dread to be asked, where are we from? Because in truth, we do not know. However, this cultural rootlessness is not entirely bad. In fact, it's really good. This cultural empathy that arises out of cultural rootlessness indicates that people are more readily available or able to adapt to cultures and comprehend them and respect them more empathetically. In a study of over 700 TCKs that Dr. Yusim conducted, she found that 66% of TCKs view their international experiences in a positive light, and that they would put their own children through the same experiences. Finally, another point that she found is that TCKs grow and experience international dimensions through their entire lives. Because we grow up in such an international setting, it turns out that we tend to maintain it so in our adult lives as well. Think of, for example, politicians, former President Barack Obama and former Secretary of State John Kerry, both TCKs who maintained the global dimensions in their lives by becoming politicians. In the same survey, 90.1% of TCKs said that they felt like their international experiences created more cultural empathy inside of them. However, they said that they felt like they had more cross-cultural skills than the opportunity to use them in their daily lives. So I present this information to you with 2 points to make. One is that I am sure that many of us can recognize that there is a somewhat negative attitude being perpetuated in our political climate today. Refugees are being denied on a mass scale, and populist parties grow at home and abroad. This has a short-term effect of denying safety, liberty, refuge, and overall positivity to the people who need it the most. But it has a definite long-term effect of decreasing immigration on a mass scale. And when you decrease immigration, you prevent the next generation of TCKs from existing. You prevent children from growing up to become growing, culturally empathetic, globally connected leaders who have seen the vastness of the world and continue to use global dimensions in their lives throughout every instance of their lives. When you close off our borders, you only close off our minds to the cornucopia of reality that exists in the world, and you create physical and social borders that prevent children from being raised to see the vastness of the world. Not only that, it also hinders the development of those characteristics such as cultural empathy or international dimensions in our children today. But on a more positive note, I would like to say that when I talk about a source of hope in an overlooked culture, I mean that every single day there are more and more children who leave their home countries in search of cultural roots over national ones. And they grow with those characteristics that make them culturally empathetic and globally minded. And that's honestly really incredible. We don't get to see that very much in cultures that try to close off immigration. It is becoming more and more common for children to grow under TCK circumstances, which indicates A, heightened international communication and collaboration, be it social, economic, or political. B, a growing capability for peaceful cross-cultural collaboration, which is something that many of us can recognize as being a bit lacking in our current political climate. And C, the creation of a vast framework of global nomads who come together to work in an international network where peaceful ideas can be discussed, Pacific treaties can be drafted, and international collaboration can ensue. I may be an outlier, but I truly believe that TCKs have the capacity and the opportunity to use their cultural dimensions to make the world a better place, to increase diplomatic relations, revolutionize foreign policy, and perpetuate peace on a global scale. Think, for example, of former President Barack Obama, a TCK himself with roots in Indonesia, America, and Kenya. He used his cultural dimensions that he developed while growing up as sitting president of the United States. He did things such as ratifying DACA, a program which allowed immigrant children, who, if I may mention, are also TCKs themselves, to have an opportunity in their home. He reopened US-Cuba relations after many years of silence, and he even went on to win the 2009 Nobel Peace Prize for his role in stopping the Iraq War. Truly, international dimensions are something that can help people create a more positive and peaceful world. When I talk about a source of hope in an overlooked culture, I mean that those 31 million children that I talked about earlier are only growing in number every single day. And when that number grows, so does the capability for cultural empathy and for peace on a global scale. So long as those 31 million children keep growing every single day, there will never be a shortage of those characteristics that will only help to perpetuate peace and empathy on a global scale. So I would like to close by thanking my parents' parents, because although their situations did not allow them to remain in their home countries, the fact that they took my parents out of their home countries mean that they gave my parents the global dimensions that they continue to use every single day of their lives and that they passed on to my sisters and I. I would also like to thank my own parents for taking my sisters and I out of the country these 6.5 years ago. Because truly, I don't know where I would be today if I hadn't had the chance to leave this country and experience the vastness of the world around me. It really opened my eyes. I agree with the 66% who believe that the international experiences that they have experienced throughout their lives allowed them to become better people, and that I would absolutely put my own children through the experience as well. But as I close today, I want to say that I truly believe that everybody, TCKs or non-TCKs, should come together and look for their own cultural and culturally empathetic global dimensions in their lives and use them to perpetuate peace in their own communities or in their world today. Thank you.